Hello everybody, this is a video about subtracting fractions. I'll be your host, Mr. Shirley, with a voice that's smooth like butter. Please make a note as you go through this video, but you don't need to include this screen just yet. I would, however, like you to pause the video for a moment and try out these questions just to refresh your memory on how to add integers. Okay, we'll assume you did that. So if you start at 5 and then move 3 in a negative direction, you end up with positive 2. And remember, when there's no sign in front, it means that it is a positive number. So your answer would be positive 2 there. Okay, you don't necessarily need to say it or write it. It's assumed it's positive if there's no sign. Okay, so if we start at negative 4 and then move 3 more in a negative direction, we end up with negative 7. If we start at 11 and then move 11 in a negative direction, that moves us right back to 0 again. And if we start at negative 6 and then move 11 in a positive direction, we end up with positive 5. Now, one thing I would like to remind you from last time is that 5 plus negative 3, for example, gets us the same result as simply doing 5 minus 3. Okay, equals 2. Or another way to do it is 5 minus positive 3, because that's effectively what we're doing, gets you positive 2. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go through this video. Alright, so make sure you include a title and a date with your notes. So the title is Subtracting Integers, in case you forgot from less than a minute ago. And our learning goal is to consider some methods for subtracting integers. And like I said with my last video, we will do a few more of these as we move on through the integers unit. We'll consider a few other ways of considering subtracting integers. Okay, so subtract an integer. It's fairly simple. The way we're going to go through it, the steps we're going to use, is to add its opposite. Okay, so if you forget what an opposite is, let me quickly refresherize your memory. So if we had the number positive 5, its opposite would be negative 5. Okay, same digit, opposite sign. Okay, very straightforward, right? The only number without an opposite, again, is 0. But when it comes to subtracting numbers, if you are just subtracting 0, there's not really a point in doing that because you already have your answer. So if we're adding its opposite, then what we're doing basically is we are changing that to the opposite. So the opposite is minus 2, and then adding that. So that makes it basically the same thing that we did in the last video when we were adding integers. Okay, and I apologize in advance if I talk about adding or subtracting fractions. For some reason, fractions roll off my tongue, and I mean integers for this video. No fractions involved in this video. So once we've got 5 plus the opposite, okay, then we just take 5 and then add negative 2. So we're moving negative 2, or 2 in a negative direction, and we end up with positive 3. Okay? Now, some of you would have said, but wait, Mr. Shirley, looking back at this question, I already know that 5 minus 2 is 3. Great, good job, thumbs up for me. Yes, that's true. But I'm starting off with easy examples where you see what the answer should be, so you know where you should get. So you can practice the method a little bit. If you don't know where you should end up, it's harder to practice the method because you don't know if you did it correctly. In this case, you really do know. All right, on to the next one. So same process. So we're adding the opposite. So we turn it to a plus sign and change our opposite, or sorry, change our negative 2 to its opposite, which is plus 2. So now we have negative 3 plus positive 2. So adding the opposite. Okay, and that ends up with negative 1. So starting at negative 3, move 2 in a positive direction. Okay, once again, I'd like you to take a moment, pause the video, and try out these questions before we continue. Okay, so the first one here has 2 negatives. Very tricky, Mr. Shirley, but you still do the same process either way. So you take both of them and you are adding the opposite. So we change the negative there to a plus, change the negative 3 to a positive 3, okay? And changing this negative to a plus and changing that positive 2 to a negative 2. All right, and then you just add those as you normally would. Okay, so I do it in a few steps. With just those numbers there, you could probably do it all at once. That's just fine. So 5 plus 3 equals positive 8. And then when you add negative 2 to that, you end up with positive 6. So you take 8, you go 2 in a negative direction, you get 6. Okay, so do the same thing with B, except the first one's already a plus, so you really don't have to do anything with that one at all. Leave it as it is. Change that negative to a plus, and the negative 5 to its opposite, so positive 5. And then once you go all the way through that, you end up at positive 8. Remember again that if I don't put the sign in, it implies it's positive. Okay, and then to finish off, we're just going to do a bit of a word problem here just to see a real world example of when this might happen. Okay, someday this will be a real world example when Shirleyville actually exists. It will happen. Okay, so the record high temperature in Shirleyville is 36 degrees Celsius, and the record low temperature is negative 26 degrees Celsius. What is the difference between the high and low temperatures? Okay, so anytime you see the word difference, you're thinking subtracting, or you should be. So we're taking high temperature and subtract the low temperature. Okay, so positive 36 subtract negative 26. Okay, but again, using the process that we learned earlier in the video, so you're adding the opposite. So you add positive 26. Okay, and that ends up with 62 is the difference between the high and the low temperatures. That's like your range. Okay, and then we'll just finish that off with a great, wonderful finishing sentence. I'm really pumped about that one. So the difference between high and low temperatures is 62 degrees Celsius. Okay, so that's just a real world example where this could happen. It happens all across Canada. They make calculations like this one. Okay, so please try out the practice work. I would like you to try and do it without calculators as much as possible, just to make sure you get an idea of what your answer should be without button pressing issues sometimes messing you up. Okay, we'll talk more about these during our meetings, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.